Are tariffs good economic policy? Are they inflationary? Or are they going to lead to some unintended consequences? We're going to take a look at that in today's brief video, but before we launch into that, I would be remiss if I didn't highlight my upcoming book, which should be released at the end of February or early March. The concept of evidence-based investing is to be a little bit of a challenge to the investment community, but also to be an introduction to the concept of active portfolio management. You can learn more at theodorehicks.com. Ever since the election, we've gotten a lot of questions about tariffs, and in particular, are they inflationary? So as is our habit, we want to look at the data, look at the research to tell us the answer to that question. First thing we want to answer, though, is who actually pays the tariff? And the reality is it is not paid by the exporting country. It's also not paid by the consumer, at least not directly. The reality is the tariffs are paid by the retailer. In order for them to receive the good, they have to pay that tariff. But what does that retailer then do? They're going to pass that cost on to the consumer. So the data, as I'm going to show you, does suggest that higher tariffs are indeed inflationary. However, there is some research that suggests that in the United States, our tariffs are actually some of the lowest in the world. A few weeks ago, I attended an event here locally sponsored by the American Institute of Economic Research. AIER is a nonpartisan, nonprofit economic think tank, and last month's presentation was given by Dr. Mike Munger from Duke University. I will put the full video or the hyperlink to the full video in the description below. If you have the time, would highly encourage you to watch his much more in-depth discussion on the topic. But one of the things that he was discussing was sugar. And why does Coca-Cola use high-fructose corn syrup here in the United States, but they use sugar everywhere else? So the answer, of course, is tariffs. Now, I'm going to show you snippets from several different research reports, and I will include the URLs in the description below so that you can read these research reports yourself. The first up, we're going to take a look. This is from the Mercatus Center from George Mason University. But in particular, we want to talk about the Sugar Act, which, as you can see, dates back to 1934. And as of the date of this research report, the current price of sugar outside of the United States is about 19 cents per pound, but inside the United States, it is about 37 cents per pound. So the reality is Coca-Cola is using high fructose corn syrup here in the United States because they're trying to contain the cost of the Coca-Cola. So the unintended consequence of the Sugar Act is we are getting high fructose corn syrup in a lot of our food here in the United States, as opposed to these manufacturers just using the cheaper sugar. It's just not cheaper in the United States. So the cost of sugar in the United States is so much more than the rest of the world because of these tariffs that date all the way back to the 1930s, but also because of the fact that as a result of those tariffs, the sugar industry has become a very large industry here in the United States, and they make a lot of political contributions to protect that tariff. So not only do we have a high cost of sugar, but we also get unintended consequences where companies like Coca-Cola are trying to contain the cost of their soda, so they use something else, which arguably is not very healthy for us. So when I first started to research this after Dr. Munger's talk, this is the first piece that I found, the myth of high U.S. sugar prices. But then as I was reading it, I started to wonder, wait a minute, who wrote this? Turns out it was written by the sugaralliance.org, the sugar industry. So they certainly have a lot of incentive to try to convince you that it's just a myth. So as you likely know, RFK Jr. has been nominated to lead the Department of Health. And one of the things that he has talked about a lot is banning high fructose corn syrup. While I would agree with him that high fructose corn syrup is definitely not healthy, I would be 100% opposed to any ban. Why? Because banning things is not how a free market society should work. However, if RFK Jr. really wanted to get rid of or at least dampen down how much high fructose corn syrup is used, what should he do? Well, I think he would advocate for the elimination of these corn subsidies and the tariffs on sugar. While we have been battling these sugar tariffs since the Great Depression, take a look at this. In 1981, Ronald Reagan instituted import tariffs on sugar, and then he later instituted import quotas. in 1983. So again, this is research for the Foundation of Economic Education, and their conclusion, this may seem small, but it is actually quite significant. For example, Kraft Foods shut down plants in the US in order to avoid the burden of these tariffs. Tariffs are inflationary, and they do have unintended economic consequences. If you have any questions, let us know.